It's actually really relevant to the kind of work I do, I guess. Back in 2000, when I was in UC Santa Cruz doing this intensive year-long scientific illustration program, they had all these digital classes, and I was like, oh no, don't make me do that. And I had a lot of resistance to it, although I did learn the basics. But what I kept saying is, I just want to make things by hand. I don't want to make everything in a computer. I don't want to draw and edit and do everything in a computer. I just really felt like I wanted to work with my hands. And so now I guess it's been 20 years that I've been really working with my hands. Most of the work I did for years and years was pen and ink, and I illustrated things like reptiles and amphibians in Montana and the vascular plants of Montana. I did half this book before I thought I was going to lose my mind. and I think upon reflection, one of the reasons why is because the incredible rigor and control that was required to convey these super simple textbook type drawings of plants, even down to the very microscopic level. I was looking back and forth between microscopes and drawing and microscopes and drawing, and it was just really draining the life out of me. And so I transitioned, and that was around 2006 maybe. I transitioned into making woodblock prints, and so I'll get to that more in a minute, but I've really built more of my life as a creative person and as an entrepreneur, as using my woodblock prints, and they're related to what I've been working on here. And so let me tell you a little bit about what I'm doing here. Before I arrived, I looked up all these words related to water, and I just let them kind of percolate on my consciousness. And as I was thinking about what I wanted to tell you about, I decided that I would begin with meander. I feel like what I've been doing here for the past month is I've been meandering like a stream. One that wanders this way and that, a single channel that wanders snake-like through its valley. For me, that's really important because my work in the world as an artist is so focused. It's so product-based. It's so controlled, in contrast to what Michelle's doing, that I really was seeking some freedom and a chance to not have a full and developed plan and not have someone waiting for a product at the end. It was just, I was like, I'm just going to let myself wander. So this, I'll tell you more about how that manifested. Let's see. Ooh. So intermittent streams, they flow really only when it's wet outside, Oh, I'm sure we've all visited intermittent streams, and that's been a theme for my residency here too. I feel like instead of being able to fully dive in to this place 24/7 like I was hoping to do before I came, I realized it became necessary for me to like flow on and off while I was here. Like I dive deeply into my work here, and literally a lot of diving deeply because I went swimming in the lake a lot, despite the freezingness. And but then I'd have to circle back and nurture parts of my work, my visual work for my business. I have to nurture those along and then switch back and do this. And that caused a lot of tension in me actually, because and resentment for a while. I'm like, I'm so mad, these projects, I told them to stay. I had deadlines, I tried to finish them, but then things went wrong, and then they intruded upon my time here. So part of me was mad about it, but part of my process here as I've meandered through my work life and then my time here has been, I've made some discoveries that I hope that I'll get to about how my current practice in work, in my visual work, how it kind of blends with some of the stuff I've been discovering here. So I'll pass that around shortly. Okay, so then braided streams. This is what I just was talking about. You know how streams, when they're going along, some of them, if they're in a big and flat enough plain, they will begin to split and braid, and they'll come back together and split. And I remember once I was leading a group in Alaska years ago in the late 90s, It was my first time ever on the raft, and I was in my own raft with teenagers, and then there were 2 other guides on this 7-week program. And I was right behind the person in front of me. I was trained to do it, a rafting guide, but we were going down this incredible braided river, the Copper River, and I literally was maybe 1 inch to the right of where the boat was in front of me, and the river split, and there was nothing I can do. I was like, wow, this boat went that way, I went this way, and I'm like, okay, that could be the end of this, because the river was going across like a half-mile, 3/4 mile plain. So I didn't know when and if I'd ever meet this group again. And but I played it cool. I was like, yeah, kids, look through the binoculars, see if you can see the other boats, And to my great joy, we did come back around, and things did come back. We found each other. And I like to think of that story because I think that I just have faith that as I'm branching apart, trying new things, that there'll be ways in which this work comes back and emerges. So, my plan on coming to the residency here, I thought a lot about this, probably too much. So I settled on, I want to do something familiar, which is related to the work I do with my woodblock prints. I'll just pass around some blocks, just so you can see what they're like. I'll talk a little more bit about this process in a few minutes, but I went ahead and I grabbed just some blocks that relate to water. Things I've done over the past, 10 or 15 years. So I wanted to do something familiar and work in a way that I'm familiar, and this is the work that I'm familiar with. It's I research, I design, I come up with an image, I spend a lot of time doing sketches, I transfer them to a block, and then I carve with many tools that are sharp and with my hands, and I carve the images into wood, and then I ink them, I print them, and then once they're dry, I paint them. So it's a very elaborate process, and there's nothing fast about it. It's fascinating, but it's very demanding physically on my body, and also mentally. It's begun to remind me of the work I did with the flora of Montana, where there's something about it, although it initially represented freedom to me from scientific illustration, it now is feeling too controlled. So that's part of what I'm allowing myself to break out of. So I was going to do something familiar maybe here, maybe I do something new, and then overall I was like, I'm just going to see which way the wind blows me. I'm just going to meander. So this is kind of what's happened. I have done, like Michelle, a lot of reading, but not as much as you, that's for sure, while I've been here. And I love this sentence I came up with. This is I laid out here for any of you who are interested in books that relate to my influences, what I've been reading, and then also what I do in the world with my field journals, my sketching outdoors, and then my woodcuts. So if you want to look at this later, feel free. But in one of these books, The Boundaries of Home, I found this quote and I loved it. Because I feel like that's what I've been doing here, is a joyful relearning of what has been taken, lost, or forgotten. I kind of talked about this. I'll say a couple more things about my background before I go into how I've been exploring and diving into being at the biological station. I've talked about the natural science illustration, I think, and the rigors and also the thrills of it. I love working with scientists. I've worked with all kinds of people. It's like you're never done learning. I love that. But it's also very controlled work, and sometimes that, as I've said, can be exhausting. So I've transitioned from natural science illustration to doing wood engraving, which is, I'll pass around a couple of books. This is an image. These are some examples of wood engraving. There's a British wood engraver who's really influenced me. He does incredible things with a variety of marks. And just like there are incredible nuances that a person can get with a brush and ink. And I love that too. I think that's neat that we have that in common, Michelle and I. But the wood engraving is like that, except you're carving away with super small, sharp tools. You're carving into end grain maple. and then printing the imagery. But it's very fine, it's very delicate work. Here's a couple books and examples of work that's inspired me. Simon Brett and Michael McCurdy. Then I broke out of that and did woodblock prints, which I'll pass around. Here's one of the prints that went with one of those blocks that I'm sending around. You can see with the, this is up on the east side of Glacier. You can see what it looks like when the black ink is printed on the paper, and then I use watercolor to add color afterwards. And I really do love to make my work. I feel like I'm always trying to lean towards making the images I choose sing. And I can't not talk about field journaling now, because really all of my work outdoors, all of my work in woodblock prints has come from this practice I have of running around outdoors, writing, drawing, and discovering the world through the process of just paying attention, going slow, and being still, with a pen and with a little color. And you never know what's going to happen when you're out there. I tend to not go out to try to find something. I just go look and see what's there. And I'll pass around just a couple of my field journals from the past 20 years. This is a crazy cool little one I made for the Missouri River, late 90s. So this practice of running around outdoors, NHFJ, Natural History Field Journaling, that is the foundation of all my work. And that process of running around outdoors, writing, drawing, I've learned the names of species, I've learned about environments, I've learned about the skies, the seasons, all different aspects of the living landscape community through that practice. And then my woodblock prints really have been an extension of that, where I'll take a species, I'll take a moment in time, and I'll try to just infuse it with some of the life and story that it has. Okay. Well, that's what I've been doing in the past, but I decided to not come here with a big plan of stuff I had to do. So I decided first I'd inquire. I would try to get to know this place through my body. And I did literally the swim, walk, listen, smell, hike, dive, repeat. I mean, I feel like every day, several times a day, I would just do this. I'd go swimming in any kind of weather. And my goal in swimming was to, where are they? This is a very important tool of inquiry through the body. My goggles. I just want to see the world from below. One of my happiest places in the world is when I'm under the rapids, the little riffles in Rattlesnake Creek, and I'm holding onto a rock and I'm just checking the world out from below. And so I wanted to do that here, and it's gotten a little thwarted by the cold. I got such bad brain freezes that I had to stop. But it's been amazing to have the time to listen to the water all the time, to see it at every time of the day and night. I've been down there. I've been for moonrise. I've been there for sunset. I've been there for sunrise. I've been there in the middle of the night. Like Michelle, I'm surprised we never saw each other out there in the middle of the night. But I feel like for me, it was just important to not come and try to do a bunch of drawings, not come and do a bunch of writing, but just do nothing but be in my body and try to get to know this place through my own senses. So, and I love this haiku. I put it on there. I do this a lot at night. I don't know if you guys do this, but the haiku is experimenting. I hung the moon on various branches of the vine. And I learned that like when I was a teenager, and I find that process of sort of doing nothing in a way, and just paying attention to the world. You stand in front of a tree, see the moon behind it, and you just kind of move and you see how you can change the world. Who does that? Anyone?
Yeah.
A few people. Okay, good. If you haven't done it, maybe you'll find yourself doing it one of these nights with the moon. It's a lovely way to just get in the present moment, get in your body, and not try to really achieve anything, but just sort of play. So I've been playing. I've been doing inquiry through the mind. Oh, I've been diving into the researchers and scientists and educators here have been so generous with their time. I've been super grateful to spend time with some of them, hearing about their work, like Michelle talked about. I've made a point to go down to the scientific paper wall and just grab papers off the wall, and I feel like I've only dipped my toe, but I've begun to try to dive into the mind and the research of what's happening around here. And it has been amazing in terms of stimulating ideas in my own mind of things I'd like to work on. What's Honka? Well, that's a great question. I'm going to get, that's what this is about. Oh. Yes, so Honka is traditional Japanese woodblock printmaking. It's an elaborate and beautiful process that's based on moisture. It cannot be done without the right amount of moisture. So I will tell you more about it in a second. So I've been exposing myself to a whole variety of things. Lots of books about the Japanese printmaking. I'll pass a couple of them around because they're really cool. I'm sure you all know Hokusai's The Wave. This is, you know, that image of the giant wave and the tiny little boat, the people in front of Mount Fuji. This piece, I went to go see it at the Chicago Museum several years ago when I was traveling across the country on a train. I was so excited I was going to finally see this. And it turns out, after looking and looking, I talked to the people, and they said, oh, no, we only take that out for about, you know, a week every 5 years because it's so fragile. And it's only, you know, it's like this big. All of the traditional Japanese woodblock prints are, they're very small. The biggest they come is maybe about this big is the biggest. But it's a, let me pass out these books. I'll tell you a little more about it in a second, but you can grab these with your hands and just see some of what that looks like. There we go. And we'll do this one too. So I've been reading about Japanese woodblock printmaking. It's something I've studied about 4 times in the past 12 years with different people around the country, but I've never brought it into my sort of active practice as an artist. I've dove into the hidden secrets of water, which is fascinating. I've been starting to read Blue Mind. It was recommended to me recently by Katie.
Hi
who's
there.
back there. Yes, that book is amazing. Listen to that. And I've been reading a lot of haiku, writing a lot of haiku. And then before my father died, he had left me a little list. And I didn't read it, I didn't remember the top thing on it until I was packing to come out here. And it was a little thing that said the gift of water. And I thought, that's really weird. What's that about? I'm about to go focus on water for a month and who knows how else longer. So I've really been, I found out it's an actual, like it's a poem or a recitation from Rumi. So that's been really interesting to try to pull different threads together on water from the scientific research and learning about projects here at the biostation to poetry and Japanese woodblock printmaking. So I've also been inquiring about this place, investing it through a lot of collecting and paying attention to the details of nature around me. Making. I'm going to tell you about what I've been making. Let's see, what to do. I'll move it to this. So, as I told you, I decided not to try to make a lot of stuff because I make stuff all the time. I'm a very intensely productive person. And so, getting to know this place through my body has been great. I decided to transition into using parts of this place to make a new kind of printmaking, which is the traditional Japanese woodblock printmaking. What's really different about that process from, well, wait a second, I'm thinking, yeah, I guess I'll tell you about that first. So, as I already told you, the process that I use to make the woodblock prints that I make is, it's very linear in terms of I come up with this idea, I develop it, I research it, I carve it, I print it, I paint it, and then hopefully it goes out into the world and hopefully gets used by conservation communities and groups of people who are interested in the subjects that I choose, like this is the white bark pine. And I've been able to collaborate with some white bark pine people at the Glacier National Park through making this piece. But with Moku Honka, the way that a piece like this would be made that'd be very different than what I'm doing here is every part of the image that I make, oh, let me see, hold on. So this is what the block looks like when it's printed. And then this is one of the versions when it's painted. And so the printing, I get the direct black lines off the wood, the painting, I add color. That happens with my hand at the end. With traditional Japanese woodblock printmaking, all the color, all the form gets added to the block. Gets added to the image from blocks directly. So these 5 blocks I carved to do an image of Flathead Lake. And they each contain information that will become part of the final image. So in a way, what's happening is abstract forms. I'll pass these around. Some of these just look like blobs on the page. You just don't, or blobs on the block. You really don't know what they are. But if you make enough of a plan and then you carve out your blocks, then what can happen is that all these abstract pieces come together to make an image. And not only can you go from the process of inking each of these blocks with water-based ink and then printing them, so you can bring the images together to make your your formal image. You can also take an image apart into its various parts. And I find that this is really interesting, this process. So I set up my little place here. This is where I've been working, in my cabin. I brought it to you in a wagon. So that you could see. For me, it's important that I'm actually working down at this level. I sit here with my sheepskin that my old friend gave me, and I sit here and I set up everything I need. I've got my water from the lake. I've got my rice paste to thicken my ink. I've got my pigments. I've got more rice paste. I've got a brush to wet the wood. The wood has to be wet for me to work with it. I've got different brushes made out of deer hair and horse hair. They're beautiful. Whole hundreds of years of wisdom and craft and skill go into making all the parts of this setup. And these brushes are part of that. Brushes to move the ink around, and I've got everything that I need except the paper. And the paper for this process is, I have to prepare it a day ahead of time by moistening it with water. And I've been using water from the lake. I have to get it just the right moisture. It takes a lot of experimenting because I'm not a master at this. And that's part of what I love, is that I'm like discovering this. It's a new thing for me. I find it really, really exciting. And so I've got my paper that's ready to go, and then what I do is I bring the paper across the blocks one by one, and I print each color of those 5 blocks that are going around the room. And so it's sort of like a process of watching weird blobs come together into something that makes sense. And then, so I'm really interested in this process. It's just like our bodies are made of, we're made of water, we're made of air, we're made of soil, and we're made of heat, and we're made of plants and wood, and we're made of all these things. And the scientists could speak much more clearly. We're made of hydrogen, carbon. I don't even know all those things, but we could give different recipes for what we're made of. there's no doubt that our bodies are made of many, many things, just like a life is made from many parts, or a story from many, many characters. So I find after all these years of trying to think about, okay, how do I convey this species that's so interesting to me? Say, a great blue heron. How do I convey it? What is its environment? What season is it in? What time of day is it? There are all these pieces I have to bring together. And after doing that so long, now I find that through mokuhanga, through this process of using different blocks, I can I'm beginning to play with what it's like to take, I guess, to build a landscape or a moment in a different way, or to take it apart and look at its different elemental pieces visually. If it sounds confusing, don't worry, it is. I'm on the journey. And I'm sorry I don't have really super cool visuals to show you. That is what I'm going to learn, so I can do that. What's cool about these prints, there are a couple violet green swallows flying over the lake here, is that by choosing to use different colors with the same blocks, you can create different worlds. And it turns out, not surprisingly, I've been learning that the Japanese, there's a tradition, I believe it's called Oban, and the masters back in the 1800s and 1900s, early 1900s with mokuhanga, were part of what it was to be a master, was to be able to create the same environment in 8 different situations. So for example, that same view in the snow, that same view when the temple bells are tolling, that same view during a spring rainstorm, that same view at midnight. This is the idea. So anyway, this just gives you a sense for how I can play with the colors and just create different worlds. And so although there is, in some ways I feel like an eye surgeon, which I'm doing when I'm doing this, and my father was an eye surgeon, so I think a lot about that. But there's a lot of precision involved in this on one hand, but on another hand, there's like an incredible play and looseness with the water and with the color, and sort of unpredictable things can start to happen, although it's still clearly within a very constrained space. So I've been playing with this, and that has been intense. It takes a lot to coordinate this, but it has been really joyful. So I'm going to pass those around for you to check out. And then I'll tell you, I guess I'll show you the last thing I've been doing with mokuhanga is a total experiment. I talked with Stony the other day, and we talked about how, well, so much of my work is small. What would happen if I scaled it up, or what would that be like? So I decided to jump in and start playing with big pieces of plywood, and I found that, God, if I thought it was hard to carve these, these are way harder. Partly because the wood is a lot harder than what I have been doing here. In this size, but I decided, so I'm still going to try to do it. So I jumped in, I carved a couple simple shapes. And for me, in my mind, I was just thinking, okay, okay, this could be light, right? Light, heat, we're all made of that, our world depends on it. And this is a semblance of water. And so I sat down, I did sit down. This is my paper in here. This is part of what I do, is I have to prepare all my paper. It's in a towel because I had to get it to the right moisture so I could print it, and it feels cool to the touch. That's how I know it's kind of doing this thing. So I just have begun to play with these. It's hard for me not to judge what I'm doing because I'm so used to being in a, oh look, there's funny stuff from the world, dust on here. I'm so used to kind of casting what shall we say, a focused eye on my work, I don't know, a critical eye. It's hard for me not to do that, but I'm just gonna keep on going, despite. So this isn't anything in particular cool to show you, except that it's just a step in the process, where instead of working much smaller, I'm gonna keep on working larger, and I'd like the colors to come out a lot more translucent than I've been able to get them. But as I said before, this process is typically used with a very small block and a small piece of paper. So this is, I don't know, I'm just kind of doing my own thing here. But I'm having fun with it, and I'm just starting to do something a little different as I think about water. These are all, oh, who knows what they're gonna look like. I'm just gonna keep working on them, playing. So that's sort of my free-flowing project I'm working on. And then the top one, I'm actually really excited about this. This is the project I didn't know I would develop while I was here. I didn't know I'd get into it, but I have found a lot of inspiration that I started working on a conservation alphabet for Montana about 20 years ago. And it was like A is for alpine, B is for barn, C is for cottonwood, and each one would tell stories about this part of the landscape. But I set it aside for 20 years, and but after talking with researchers and really thinking about the watershed, crown of the continent, I've decided, well, I did an informal survey of some of the scientists and educators here, and I've had them, they've been giving me their list from A to Z of what are important in particular, intriguing things in this landscape that go with these letters of the alphabet. And so that's been super fun to get these lists back from people and think about, like, I've got my list, now I've got all these different lists, and I feel like I'm in sort of the think tank period of this project, because yes, it's gonna be a project. Yes, I've decided I'm gonna finally work on an alphabet book. I don't know what it'll be called yet, whether its focus will be on the Flathead watershed or on the crown of the continent. But I feel like if kids are learning how to read, which they all do in our culture, why not help them learn to read the landscape as well? So this notion of building ecological literacy, which has really been a theme throughout all the years of my work. But as I had this little revelation while I've been here too, doing a lot of hula hooping on the shore, that ecological literacy is not enough. It's not enough if we want to raise up people who care about the place and care about the earth. That, we need to fall in love with it. We need to fall in love with the earth and with the landscape community. So, I don't know, that's just an evolution in my thinking about ecological literacy. I don't know where that will lead yet, but I've decided that I really need to get back to teaching, because teaching has been part of my artistic practice. For years it was, and then I set it aside a few years ago. But that joyful process of learning about the place together, by writing, by drawing, by creating work outdoors, collecting things, it's an amazing way to sort of connect people, not only to each other and to ourselves, but really to the land. So that's what I decided. I'm going to reinvigorate that part of my artistic process. And the last thing that was kind of, that I've been percolating on is this whole thing of triptychs, or tableaus, curiosity coverage, shrines. So these are a couple things I got from my mother-in-law. She got them in Russia. They are triptychs from the Russian Orthodox Church. And for years, I've been kind of playing with this idea. I haven't done much with it, but I've been just intrigued with what is it like to have something like this big that you can close. It looks like nothing much, and then you can open it. And in this case, it has icons from the Catholic Church, Mary and Jesus and Joseph, I think. But what is this process of having like a special thing and being able to open it to remember something, that you might want to remember? For me, I'm not a Catholic, but it's just the idea of this process of carrying something, having it be precious, opening it, remembering, closing it. Like, what is that thing that we do? Some of us do. And I'm very intrigued with the notion that something important can be contained within a diptych or a triptych. I don't like the name diptych or triptych. It sounds so boring. I'd much rather say like a hand chapel or or a tiny shrine, or in Mexican folk tradition are these retablos, which are incredible. They are similar to these in many ways, but they are like a visual representation of when you have a prayer come true and you make a thank you. And oftentimes it's like it'll be inside something like this, like, oh, thank you, you know, Mother Mary, for helping me walk again after the bull gored me, you know, this type of thing, or something, you know, much more ordinary. So I again, as I've been meandering through my time here, I don't know where that's going to lead me. I'll just pass these around because they're intriguing. But I did. I wonder if I have it out here. I have been thinking a lot about how I can take my work, what I already do, what might happen if I create pieces that open and close that are wood instead of paper. I went to the shop here, and with Tony's help and Eric, they set me up with the machines, and I cut a bunch of pieces of wood to make tiny little diptychs and triptychs. They're about the size you'd fit in your pocket. So I'm going to keep on working on those and see what comes of that. But for me, like, I have such a deep and abiding love of the living landscape community, and you know, the animals and plants and seasons and skies that we share our lives with, that we so often we don't think about, you know, because we're busy working or buying groceries or cleaning the kitchen or, you know, calling our moms or all those other important things we do. But it's just, we're such a disconnected people from place, in large part related to the industrial machine, you know, the industrialization that has created a lot of problems. Without going into that, I think you probably know what I mean. So I think my quest is really on how to use my artistic practice personally and in community to help reconnect people with a vital, kind of a vital connection with their landscape community. So my meandering has brought me to that. It's been lovely. It's been such a gift to be able to be here. Mostly, not only because of the ideas I've gotten, but because I feel like I've just gotten a new, like, upwelling of inspiration and energy for work ahead, which is really worth way more than its weight in gold. Because without that, what's the point of it? So I'm super grateful. If you have questions, let me know.
This could be a question really for any artist, but do you have any, in what you do you sell any of your works? That's part one. And how can you possibly, as an artist, even think of a price tag to put on your work when so much goes into a piece of work? Not just the physical part of it, but the mental part that may have taken years to acquire.
Yeah, years in your whole life.
Yeah.
Well, yes, I do sell my work because listening to my heart led me down that very complicated path, but a very joyful path of being, you know, a creative entrepreneur. I do sell my work. So, and how do I price it? There's no perfect way to do it. Everyone you talk to will have a different 2 cents, but it is wildly fascinating that you can have a pencil drawing from someone with a certain name and certain connections, which could go for $20,000, you know, in a gallery in Texas, and then you could have an incredibly detailed, exquisite, tiny painting from Persia that goes for the equivalent of 20. Like, how does that make sense? And I can't explain it here, but for me, my process has been, I look at the world, I see what are similar things, and then I think about my time, my effort, my energy, and I just sort of try to adjust my prices from there. Sometimes I find it interesting. I find it very freeing, actually. Sometimes I go to shows, and if someone wants something, I'll say, well, how much do you want to give me for it? You know, or just, or maybe if they only have $10 or they don't have any, you know, they don't have $100, I'd be like, you love this thing, please take it, you should live it. So I feel like that's super important to incorporate that approach into my work as well, because, you know, pricing is such a, you know, why make it so super hard in terms of like a, you know, a thing that's always the same? That's my 2 cents.
Well, can I jump in there? Because when I was
Yes.
visiting with Claire in the studio the other day, she also talked about how she makes her work accessible to people with all means based on kind of reproducible items such as cards and calendar and things like that. So having access to these.
That's very important to me. Yeah, so in my work world, I sell the original woodblock prints, which are like the ones I've sent around, because I just want you to be able to see them and touch them. And they're, you know, just because I love the materiality of it. So I sell those, you know, they certain price for those, like 100 or more. And then I make note cards, which I sell wholesale throughout the country, so that these little jewel, you know, I love to think of, I don't know, I just like my work to be available for $4 or $5. So people can hopefully send them to their loved ones, and there's more connectivity going on between people in the world and building goodwill. So I love to be a part of that, it's super important to me. And then I make calendars, and I have to show you this because, well, this is my last year's calendar. Tall and thin, has 12 new woodblock prints every year, Northern Rockies, focus always on where we live. But yesterday, I finally, after months of work, I'm so relieved. This is one of the things I was being an intermittent stream with. I was having to run back and forth to work with the designer and the printer, and why wasn't the color showing up right? And still, this is quite imperfect, according to how I painted them, but I got my calendar printed yesterday, and it's going to be bound. And then these, so I do like to, I'm able to send those around the country. And it all helps different income streams for the creative people.
But I know you've, I've seen your work in stores around town, but do you have a website as well?
I do. I wonder if I don't even know. Sorry, I'm just not, oh, look, I did.
Okay, good.
So I have a website, and then you can follow me on Instagram. Personally, I think Instagram is the coolest thing for artists only. That's what I do, because you can, artists talk about their process, how they work. And it's so intriguing to see that. I feel like I'm sort of aware of printmakers all over the world and what we're all doing, and we're learning from each other, and it's very, so anyway, that's Instagram, and then Facebook if that's your thing. Yes, Tony?
So I have a question. Since you spent a small amount of time of your life here and got inspired, are you inspired to make something that can also be on our walls someday?
Oh, I definitely am, and I, as maybe you can tell, I do tend to have many ideas at once. But yes, oh yeah, totally. I'm working, I really see this specific residency time at the beginning and end of October 26th as just sort of the first step. You know, the kind of time I've spent here, I've totally fallen, I mean, I already was in love with nature, right? That's pretty much given, but just, I feel like I'm just beginning to get to know water and fresh water and water issues, and thinking a lot about the stuff that I've been doing already for my whole life. Like, I mean, my whole life I've been like, where does a stream come from? And I'll spend 5 hours walking upstream in my sandals. You know, so I've spent my whole life swimming. I love it. I love exploring in the water, 3 dimensions. So it's like, it's bringing together stuff I've done my whole life. And so I'm excited to try to develop more relationship with water in my work. Yes. Yes, Jim?
So
Is that you under there?
I want to ask
Oh,
you
yeah.
a question. I'm going to ask you for help.
Okay.
So you mentioned ecological literacy. So that's it's great to have your help with that. But we do that, right? So Monica and
Wow.
Stephanie do that with K-12, and our professors and graduate students do that at the university level, teaching folks about the environment and developing the literacy. What I think we need help with from artists is ecological empathy. That is, how is it that we get people to care about the ecosystem, to care about the microorganisms, to care about the food webs and the relationships that are on the landscape? We can tell them about them, we can describe them, we can quantify them, measure them, come to understand them, but to get people to care about them is a different sort of a job.
That's where
And
the
I think it's a
art, you
job that
gotta fall in
artists are
love.
particularly talented in accomplishing. So I would like to ask your help with ecological empathy. And in the future, again, a mission sort of for all the artists and residents that come to the station is that to help us work on that aspect of what we would like to get going in our community.
Well, and I think Claire kind of brought that up at the beginning too, of talking about maybe the restraints of the literacy component, and also thinking about, yeah, like scientific literacy, how that can maybe be tailored to a pretty specific audience too. And so I love the term, the phrase, Jem, ecological empathy. Is that new?
I think I'm going to go trademark it.
Right. No, share it, hashtag.
No, that is one of the essential questions I wrap my mind and heart around all the time, is, you know, even before I decided to go, you know, back when I was in college, I was like, what do I do? What does the world need? How can I contribute? And I kept thinking, I gotta be an organic farmer, and then, but something in me just called me towards visual work, and I didn't know what to do. I felt like I was gonna fail the world because I wasn't gonna do something useful, because I thought, well, how useful is beauty? And I guess for me, beauty was a part of being an artist. And my grandmother said to me, she said sometimes, I can't remember the exact phrase right now, but basically she affirmed that beauty is sometimes what people need more than anything.
Yeah, no kidding.
Because the world is broken. We all have broken hearts. There is a lot of brokenness, a lot of disconnection, and there are a lot of places that where things aren't going beautifully, and whether there's grief or anger or sadness or things inside of us, sometimes we need to find energy from somewhere to keep doing our work in the world. So I think about that a lot, and I guess just one thing I reflect on, back in the 90s, I was teaching in this college program in Alaska, and we had students sharing their work, their reports and projects with the National Park staff at the end of the program, and they were sharing their data they collected and this and that, and then a couple people got up and they read right from their natural history field journals, and they showed sketches they did outdoors, and they reflected on what happened inside of them when they spent that much time drawing and observing a subject. And the students themselves said, I mean, that thing I paid attention to, that I wrote about, and I sat with and drew, and it is a part of me. I will never forget it. I feel like it's a friend inside me that I'll take wherever I go. But then what was really, and that was awesome, because I feel like that is really building that empathic connection with the land. But then what was so cool is these national park, the superintendent of the park, Wrangell St. Elias National Park and stuff, they got up and they're like, we are so grateful that you shared your journal entries and your sketches with us. They said that raw work, that kind of private or raw work they said that helped us remember why we sit at our desks and we do what we do. That is the reason why we're doing this. And so I feel that tool of, the practice of keeping a natural history field journal and sharing it in community can be a real empathy builder between people in place, and between people and their own selves, really, too. So, okay, anything else?
Nanette, you had something, huh?
Oh, yeah, well, it's not nearly as deep as all that, so. So you were describing your new work you're doing with the Moko Honka. Probably saying that right. And you were up there, kind of displaying your 5 different blocks, and then you showed us, your prints from far away, right? And I'm thinking, oh my God, they're so perfect, they're so aligned, and how does she do that? And then it came around, and I noticed, like, oh, it's not absolutely perfect. Some
Yeah.
of them are a little off, but I like that. I mean, it is, really is the deconstruction of a painting or a picture,
Mhm.
and then putting it back together, and it really does add something, I think, to the whole print itself, those small little variations that you were getting.
I think, yeah, I appreciate that. I appreciate that thought. I had someone tell me a few years ago when I was trying some other thing and the registration wasn't perfect, she's like, but that's not a print, that's not right. And I never went to school for printmaking, by the way, so I've really just learned this all on my own, and like pursuing people and pursuing weird books late at night. Studying lines, I love them. So, yeah, and this person was like, that's not a print, you can't do that because it's not perfectly registered. And I thought, what, like my intuition was sort of like, that adds to it. To me, that's interesting to me. So I think along this new line of thought, I'm kind of going down with being able to deconstruct form and then put it back together, or maybe not put it back together, or, you know, I like that shows those edges. Plus, I don't need one more thing to try to be perfect at it.
Yes,
Oh. Yes, Deborah?
Since you've been here, it seems like you've had such a deep intellectual and physical relationship in meditation on water, focused on water. So I'm wondering, what would you say you take away from here? Like, what do you take with you from that deep meditation, and particularly this lake?
Well, I think, well, I don't know exactly, I'll have to find out. But I've really, because I've tried to approach the lake on many levels just through my body and not only through my mind, and my heart, I feel like I've slept every night with the window open, even if the waves were like crashing. So I slept very badly many nights because I just wanted to be able to feel the air. I wanted to hear the waves. I wanted to let it all just like infuse me. I've been laying in the water. I've been diving to the bottom and staying on the bottom as long as I can and looking up. There's something about that body experience. And then looking through the microscope and seeing worlds like, that I didn't know it was there. So I feel like I'm leaving with more of like a body experience of what lakes are about. Plus I hiked into some alpine lakes to sort of, seeing the little alpine lakes, thinking about how they're flowing down into the watershed, and all of that multifacetedness, I think, is a richness that I'm going to draw from and keep listening to.
Thank you.